Welcome back to another no-code video. Now, in the previous video, I talked about the no-code app building canvas and how you can use that just really to blueprint out your own app. But I wanted to record another video which is just showing me doing it myself, showing me going through it, using the canvas and just putting together an app. Now, I'm going to pick Airbnb for a couple of reasons. Clearly it's one that we've talked about a lot throughout the different pillars videos. It's one that at this point you should have seen a few examples of, hopefully one you're familiar with. And I think as well, there's a lot you can say about Airbnb in each of the canvas boxes, so it's a pretty good demo app. Now, a couple of things to say. Number one, you'll probably struggle to follow this video if you haven't already watched the other one where I kind of talk through the slides, and the link for that is in the description. On top of that, I'm just going to kind of fly through this fairly ad hoc. I'm not trying to get it right, I'm not trying to get it exact. I really just want to try and give you my thought process and just kind of, I think, just help you understand how I would go about this. So I'm on Whimsical. There's a link to the canvas on Whimsical as well. The first thing to do is just pop up to the top right hand corner, hit copy, and copy yourself a little version of it. I've done that. Because we're going to do Airbnb, I've renamed it to Airbnb at the top. So the first place I always start is up the top hand left corner with the problem statement. Now, we didn't talk too much about that in the previous video, but it's really just, what is your app trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? So let's do this for Airbnb. So really, tourists are trying to find actually, let me word that slightly differently. Tourists want to find more authentic, local, and potentially more affordable places to stay than generic hotels. And I'm just going to wing through this, I'm not trying to do anything kind of super polished here. Hosts want to get better returns and more flexibility on their property assets. And just put apartments, or as we would call it in the UK, flats. Now, because I'm writing on Whimsical, clearly I can fit a lot more in here than might fit in the box, so you'll probably find I'm a little bit wordy. Quite often you're going to choose to draw this out on a piece of paper or print it out, and then just write in it yourself, and that's okay. You'll probably write a little bit less, but don't worry too much about that. Now, typically the next thing that I will do is write out personas. You could go to core functionality first, it's up to you, but I'll show you why. So if I talk about, let's talk about hosts first of all. So I like to get out, who is the group, where are they going to use it, and what are the kind of key things they're trying to do and key things they care about. So host wants to upload apartments, confirm bookings, and chat with guests. They will use web and mobile, and they value anything that will save time and effort. Now, you could write anything there. You could also say, perhaps a host values, a clean interface, whatever it might be, but you can really capture anything that's relevant to you. This is just, my personal feeling on it. Tourists want to easily find, because I think that's quite important, high quality safe apartments. So they want to find high quality safe apartments, make bookings and chat with hosts. They will use mobile and web equally, and value, and this could really again be anything. Let me give you an example. So for me, what do I value in Airbnb? I value great photos. So I value great photos, useful descriptions, and trustworthy reviews. Now we're trying to accomplish a couple of things here with personas. Number one, we just want to mark out who are the people who will be logging into our app. If you are building Uber, you're going to have riders, you're going to have drivers. You might also have business users, for example, a secretary or administrator who's booking rides for other people. So it's just really this concept of like, who is actually going to log into this app? For many people, perhaps for yourself, for your own app idea, this might just be one generic group called users, and that's totally fine. But here we've got hosts, here we've got tourists, and I'm just putting in whatever information I want. One of the things that stuck out to me here is value, great photos, useful descriptions. And so as I start to really think about my canvas, one of the big things that's going to be in my head is, what can I do to make it to make sure pictures are clear and prominent? I mentioned finding high quality apartments. What can I do if I'm thinking about apartments and safety? What are the things that I can quickly show in my app that are going to be core functionality that kind of help that happen? And so that kind of brings us to our core functionality, which you can kind of make as many things again as you like. I like to keep it kind of between 1 and 5, preferably around about 3. Again, it's quite variable, and I talk more about it in the longer video. But I'm going to say number 1, I want to be able to book an apartment. Number 2, I want to be able to upload an apartment as a host. Don't worry so much about attaching personas here. Number 3, I want to find and browse apartments. And number 4, my last one, leave reviews. You could say chat's a core functionality, but I'll leave it out for now. Oops, I meant to put a 4 in front of that. There we go. So that's just my core functionality. In actuality, that's round the wrong way. Probably just want to adjust that slightly. Whoops, there we go. Again, not trying to do anything too polished here, just kind of showing how I think about it. So once I've got my core functionality, my personas, I now move on to my generic data. Generic data can be a little bit tricky to understand if you think about it too much, but actually it's just as simple as, what is the data that is not a user group? In Airbnb's case, we're going to have apartments, we're also going to have reviews, and we're going to have stays. So none of these are a persona. You do not log into an apartment, you do not log into a review, and you do not log into a stay. So that's really all I need there. I could put other things, chat messages or something like that. If I was doing Uber, for example, then my generic data might be something like, car details. It could be trips, for example, a history of all the trips I've taken. If I'm doing an e-commerce site, then things like orders, inventory, etc., those are all going to be generic data. And generic data, as a result, is probably misleading because it can be very, very specific data. It's just any data which is not data you log into. It's not a tourist, it's not a host, it's not a user, not a driver, etc. So there we go, we've got that. Now we're going to crack on with data relationships, because now that we've got our personas and our generic data, we want to know how these relate. Again, a couple of ways you can do this. If you're on paper especially, you might want to just draw little lines between them. But the way that I'm going to do it is just by writing out a few of the sentences that we used in our previous data examples. For example, a tourist can have multiple stays, but a stay can only be booked by one tourist. Now you can write this out as, a tourist can have multiple stays, or but a stay can only have one tourist. I'm just going to add a little bit of context for me, because remember, the point of this canvas is that I can come back to it later, I can refer to it, and it's going to make sense. So I'm just writing out my relationships. Again, if you're on paper, feel free to use shorthand, just a good way to draw it out. A tourist can have multiple reviews, but a review is written by only one tourist. Again, giving myself context. If I was on paper, I probably want to save some space. I can also do a tourist. Actually, let's do a host can have multiple apartments, but an apartment is owned by only one host. Again, just adding that context. And I think that is my main data relationships. What else have I got? I've done review, I've done apartment, I've done tourist, stays, and then also I think there's a relationship between a stay can have one apartment, but an apartment can have many stays. So we're just writing out those questions. You don't have to write them out like that, but I just like to say it out loud and go, does that make sense? A stay can only have one apartment. Yep, that sounds about right. I can only stay in one place at a time, And then probably actually one other thing, which is an apartment can have many reviews, but a review can only have one apartment. You can't review 2 apartments with the same review. And so, could you fit more in there? Possibly. There might be a couple others when I really think about it. I'm just trying to fly through this, and you should take the time to think about it. Just kind of compare tourists with stays, compare hosts with stays, with reviews, with apartments, so on and so forth. But very quickly, what you have in this kind of, you know, upper left, kind of almost half of the canvas is you now have enough to go start your app and create a database. You know, you've got enough there to do the database, you've got enough to do the sign in, you've got a fair idea of the things that you've got to go and create. I mean, frankly, at this stage, you could get started. The next thing that you can do, and you've got key screens pages here, that's the next thing you can do. I quite like to do it personally before the secondary functionality, just because key screens and pages is hard to get down. You're going to have a lot of key screens and pages, and so the way to think about it is forget any secondary functionality. You know, just focus on the left hand side. It's not always going to be true, but it's a good way if you're trying to figure out, well, what is a key screen? You know, how do I know it's key versus not key? If it covers core functionality, it's key. If it doesn't, it's not. Simple rule, not always true, but simple rule to follow. So we're going to have you know, a search page. So search, browse page for listings. We're then going to have a specific apartment details page. We're then going to have a booking page, bookings page, pages. And again, look, some of these might be a couple of pages. You know, is my booking screen going to be 1 page or more? I don't know yet. When I draw that out, I might feel differently, or when I start building it. So don't worry about getting too exact. Could do another one here, for example. So we could do, you know, leave a review page. And another just one I might want to do is, you know, host booking management page. Now, I've left login / sign up page out there. To me, that's what I would call a hygiene factor. In other words, it's not even worth writing down because it's so obvious. You could write it down, especially if you're going to do anything custom. For this, it's literally a login page. I'm going to leave it out for now. But actually, you can see, you know, as we start to kind of look at this, and let me just again rearrange these. But, you know, as we start to look at this, you kind of get the impression that something that seems so big and daunting, like building Airbnb, that's huge. That's a massive, you know, several billion company. How are you going to do that? Well, you can kind of break it down to just this. Now, is Airbnb a lot more than what I've got here? Absolutely, of course it is. But this is how Airbnb started. In fact, Airbnb probably started with less than this. You know, this is almost what we would call a minimum viable product, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next lesson. But the idea of a minimum viable product is you build the minimum you need to get the value out of your product. You know, do you need a settings page? Do you need a page for that? Does the user need to be able to like upload things and customize things? Possibly, but that can come later. In order to get the key functionality that your app provides, how do you do it? What does it need, etc. So really, all you ever need to do in Airbnb is book the apartment, upload it, find and browse apartments, leave reviews. That's it. And so, you know, correspondingly, we just really need to be able to search and browse for the apartments. We need to be able to look at the specific apartment's details. We need to be able to book it. If I'm a host, I need to be able to manage the booking. And then if I'm a guest, I need to be able to leave the review. So when you look at that, you can write page, you can write screen, doesn't really matter. It depends if you're really focused on mobile or web, one over the other. But that is it in a nutshell. That's the only pages I absolutely need. Now I'm going to look at a bit of my secondary functionality. And the thing I just want to say before I start this is, you don't have to write everything out. This is just a way to kind of gauge, right, if I think that's my core app, what are the other bits and pieces I'm going to need to really make this work? So, you know, for example, and these are just my ideas for Airbnb, you could be totally wrong, but for example, you know, I'm going to need the ability to filter apartment, you know, details. So I could have has a hot tub, has pool, etc. So if I wanted to really, one of the things you do in Airbnb is you can kind of specify, do you want a place with a hot tub, with a pool, with a parking, for example, anything. To me, that's secondary functionality. It's not absolutely essential, so I just pop it in there. Could do other thing, you know, upload a profile picture and edit a profile bio, and again, put in whatever you like, be as specific as you like, be as non-specific, add, change, remove credit cards / payment details. Just again, could I launch without the ability to add a credit card and pay? Oh, probably not. But is it core functionality? Again, probably not. What else have we got there? So edit review. I mean, you really can't go for anything here. We had chat between, let me call that live chat between host and tourist. Now some of these are going to be contentious, you know you're doing this right if you're putting a few in and going, is that core functionality, is that secondary? Live chat's a great example. It's very hard now to imagine Airbnb where I can't do a live chat on the website with the host or the guest, but this is them, you know, the point of this canvas is to make you think a lot more holistically about your app. And this is where you start to think, well, do they need a live chat from day one? Because if that's going to take me a week to build, for example, do they need that from day one? Is that worth me to launch and lay and learn and all of that right now? Or can I just give them each other's, you know, phone number? Can they just text? Can they just do something like that? Can they email? You know, so this is where you're not so much saying, is this feature in or is it out? But it's more just to start thinking about it. Do I need it right now? If I think I do I need it fully fledged? You know, does it have to have everything right now? Or can I just, instead of live chat that's fully functioning, runs all on my NoCode app, actually here's just the phone number, here's the email. So again, it just depends, and you can argue about it all day long. You know, what else could we put in here? We could have notifications when apartment listing updates. I don't know, that could be anything. That's a crap example, but you know, you could easily fill this whole box. That's why it's so big, because there's tons of stuff you can put in here. Some of it can be really specific, some of it can be really extreme. You know, you could have something like generate tax documentation, host. I could have a calendar view for host. When is apartment booked? I could even introduce, for example, Airbnb's get these kind of pricing tools, pricing optimization tools. So, you know, I can just go on all day long here. This is probably too unspecific. That is just not really going to be specific enough to be useful. But I'm just trying to give you the idea that literally anything can go in here. But the one thing that I would say, and actually it's probably why I'll now go ahead and delete this, now that I remind myself of this, is you don't want to add new features here, right? Something that would be wrong to say, for example, is if you use Airbnb, you can book apartments, right? Airbnb also has this whole massive other thing where you can book like things like, I don't know if events is the right word, experiences is what they use. You know, you can book classes, you can book tour guides, you can book like fitness stuff or expeditions or whatever. You wouldn't want, this isn't, you know, secondary functionality is not meant to be a place for all your ideas. That's not the point of it. The point of it is more to capture everything that's kind of needed to support that core functionality, to make it feel like a rounded out app. So, you know, do I need to have live chat? Probably. Do I need to be able to upload my picture, change my bio so people know who I am? Yeah, probably. I need to be able to filter it. I need to be able to edit my review, generate my tax document. Yeah. Do I need to be able to also book a kayaking experience? Probably not at this stage, so you can just leave that kind of thing. Now we have one other kind of couple of interesting things to look at. Now these are a little bit more minor, you don't have to get these exactly right. I like to write down the no-code tool I'm either going to use or the ones I think I'm going to use. So in this case, I might say that I'm going to use Webflow, and you can either just write the tools down, or you can, if you're going to use multiple, it might be worth writing what you're going to use them for. So I'm going to say Webflow for the interface. So I'm going to use that to build the user interface. I'm going to say Adalo for the mobile interface. I'm going to say Airtable for the joint, or sorry, let's say shared database. And you know, so you can just do something like that. So if you wanted to build a website with a mobile app, you could use, for example, Adalo, which is for the mobile side, and Webflow for the web side, and then use Airtable as a database between them. That might not be the right thing for you. You might want to delete that and say, actually, I just want to use Bubble for everything. I want to use Builder, you know, I want to use something else entirely. The next lesson talks a little bit more about how to pick the right tool, how to evaluate it, see if it's the right thing for you. But that's just an example again of what you can put in here. And it's really just a way of saying, right, I've got everything together. Now I've got the tools. The bit I need to do is make sure everything I want to do, I can actually do with those tools. So, you know, if I'm saying I want to do a mobile app, well, I've actually thought about what tool is going to do that. If I'm saying I want to do a mobile app and a web app, have I got a tool that can do both? Am I going to use two different tools? If so, is anything going to sit in between them to make sure it's the same database, make sure they talk, etc.? This is where you start to get into the research phase. And if that's where you're starting to get intimidated, by the way, our community is a really good place to just say, you know, just ask that question to other people who've experienced this and try and figure it out and just say, you know, this is my problem, this is the canvas I've created, this is an app I'm trying to build, you know, what should I do next? So that's no-code tools, and then the next bit is third-party APIs. Now, you might have an app that doesn't need to access any third-party services, and whether or not they're core functionality or secondary functionality, you know, might be up for debate as well. But this is a good place to think about, are there any APIs that are key to your no-code app? And the reason you want to think about that is because you need to figure out if they're going to do what you want them to do or not. I'll give you an example. Airbnb, I really need Google Maps. If I can't get access to Google Maps API, or if it's expensive or anything like that, I've got a problem that I need to sort. You know, I need to look and find, well, where's my maps going to come from before I go and build something? Because what I don't want to do is build everything on here, build my booking, build my apartment search, and then find that I can't even show a map. Then I've got to really completely rethink my idea. Now, thankfully, Google Maps is a crap example because it is really easy to get, it is pretty cheap, it is, even if you've got to pay for it, it is widely available in no-code tools, so it's not a great example, but it just goes to show kind of, you know, where you need to think about this. I'll give you another one, Stripe. So Stripe, as you may or may not know, is an API for taking payments. One of the things I've got to think about on here is how am I actually going to take payments? Okay, I'm going to take Stripe. Well, if I'm going to take Stripe, one of the things I need to bear in mind is Stripe charges a 2.9% transaction fee plus 20 pence on top of everything. So have I factored that into my business model, etc.? You know, have I went and looked at the Stripe API, make sure I understand it, make sure my no-code tool supports it? This is the kind of question and the kind of thinking this is meant to bring out. Because remember, this is just really a way of turning all those ideas in your head into a plan that you can think about and attack and go from, you know. So we've got our third-party APIs. You could have more in there. You could say, I don't know, we need an API. Oh, here's a good one. We need an API for background checks. Now, I can think of a few off the top of my head, but I can almost guarantee that if you were doing this for the first time and you are, you know, completely new to no-code, you're probably not going to know an API for background checks off the top of your head because that's pretty niche. And so you've got a couple of options. You know, you can look in the NoCode.Tech website. First of all, of course, you can ask people. But most likely you're going to go to Google and go, right, now I realise I need a background check API. I better go Google background check API and see what I find. And when I find it, I better check the cost. You know, how much is a background check? Okay, it's, you know, $2 per person. If I get 1,000 users, how am I going to handle that? You know, these are just the questions you're trying to bring out. What are the things you haven't thought of? And it's a good point to stop and look at the rest and go, is there anything else I need an API for? Do I need it for uploading apartments, finding and browsing them? No? Okay, brilliant, can move on. So at that point is where I would look at scenarios, and this is where I would look at the WAD method or the WAD method, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And it's just that idea of, you know, who is trying to do what are they trying to do, what's the outcome, you know, when are they trying to do it, and then what is the action, and what is the data that's created off the back of that. Now, there's various different ways you can write it. I'll show you the way that I do it. It's a little bit akin to something called a user story, if you've heard of that before, but more aimed around our kind of 4 pillars, how we think about them, how they all connect together. So let's have a little go. And by the way, the way I tend to think about scenarios is you probably, so that the idea of scenarios, and again, I've covered this in the previous video, but the idea of scenarios is you essentially try and you take your functionality and turn that into something that you can sit down and execute. One of the biggest things that I've personally found, and I've heard other people talk about as well, is when they're trying to build an app, try to build something out, it's very easy to log into something and not know where to start. You know, you kind of go, right, I want to build Airbnb, and then you get hit with a blank canvas when you log into a tool and you go, I don't know where to start. And even if you know, right, they need to book an apartment, you immediately think, well, what do I need to do? Do I get my database set up? Do I build the page first? I don't know. And so in some ways the whole canvas is designed to help with that, but in particular scenarios are just about kind of writing out, well, how does this piece of functionality work? So if I want to book an apartment, well, what does that mean? Because, you know, are they clicking the book button? And if they do, like, what comes up next? Do they get a calendar view? Do they put the dates in? What am I saving to the database? Because then I start thinking, well, if I'm going to book an apartment, I'll need to know the apartment, the date, you know, the amount. I'll calculate that cost of the whole stay, etc., etc. And so again, just like everything else, this is about creating a thought exercise where you're going to be thinking about your app, but actually scenarios are a little bit more involved because we're going to write down what actually happens. Now again, if you're on paper, you're probably going to be less verbose than myself, but I'll write this out. So, you know, when a host wants to upload an apartment, they click the upload button on their profile, and you can make this up, by the way, right? You don't need to know it's going to be on their profile. You can just say they click the upload button. It just depends how you're visualizing it in your head. In my head, I'm picturing there's a navigation bar up the top. There's a little button up there that says upload, or maybe there's a sentence page or a profile page, something like that. That's what's in my head. But I can say, okay, so when a host, so that is, although I've used the word who, when, that is the who. So when a host wants to upload an apartment, that's what they want to achieve. They want to get that apartment up there. They're going to click the upload button, so that's the when. So when that happens, we should create, you can, by the way, you can say stuff like we should, it could, the app should, whatever. You know, we should create, I'm just going to say we as if we're the company or something. We should create a new record in the apartments table with the apartment address, what between 1 and 30 pictures or photos, the apartment, I'm just going to shorten that, description, and what else do we need in there, and the nightly cost. So there's a few ways to think about this. I'll tell you what was running through my head as I thought about that. I'm first of all thinking, okay, I need to think about the host side of the journey, or the side of the website. You know, where are they uploading something? Where do they click to upload an apartment? But this is still just, you know, a core bit of functionality. But where do they click to upload? And then I'm thinking, well, the first thing we need to do is create a new record in the apartments table. That is what this action does. It creates a new record in the apartments table. And then I'm like, well, what do I need in there? I need the address of the apartment. I need the photos. How many photos do I want? Well, I probably want between 1 and 30. If you're looking at an average Airbnb, you want as many photos as possible. So you need to have a fairly high upper limit there. And then I'm thinking about the apartment description. Well, I need to get some text in there. And then I'm thinking about the nightly cost. And there's various different ways you'll think about this or ways you'll approach it. But I immediately then think, well, now I know that I need a screen. That screen is going to show the cost. It's going to show the pictures. It'll probably show the description. I might want a rich text variable, a rich text input that saves it as a rich text variable rather than just plain text, because maybe they want to include inline bullet points, pictures, whatever it might be. So whatever you think out the back of that will be different from me, and it's entirely up to you. And I guarantee the first ones you do will be nowhere near as detailed as the later on ones. But again, these are just the kind of thoughts I'm trying to create. And so I know when I see this page, to get this core bit of functionality here, I'm going to need an upload button somewhere. I'm going to need to create an apartments table, and then I'm going to have some sort of form where the host can input a bunch of apartment pictures, where they can input the address, etc. So it just gives you an idea, because now you can take that and go build something. You can go build the upload screen, you can go build the database, you can go build the workflow that takes that data, make sure it looks right and puts it in the database. Just gives you an example. So there you go for the second part here of core functionality. You've already got your scenario. Let's look at the first one. So book an apartment. When a tourist wants to book an apartment or make a booking, could be whatever, they select the apartment and calendar dates, and this is where you need to think, right? Because when they book, well, what happens? Does it go to the host for approval? Do we just accept the booking? Do we have an option for that? You know, this is when you start to think out, because what am I going to build? Because one of the things that happens in a software project, and I'm digressing a little bit here, but one of the things that happens quite often in a software project is you make a plan and you plan to stick to it, and then suddenly that takes like a couple of months longer, and it's not because it's, you know, harder than you expected per se, but it's because there's all sorts of little details you didn't think about. You know, okay, so if the host is going to, for example, if the host needs to approve it, brilliant. If we're going to have the option for them to approve it or not to approve it, well, now you have to go back to that upload apartment, and now you've got to add a switch in there that says, should this be an immediate approval? Does it need you know, the host consent to allow the booking, to approve it? This is why software projects get really out of I don't know if out of sync is the right phrase, but it's where they just tend to grow arms and legs and kind of snowball. So when a tourist wants to book an apartment, they select the apartment and they select the calendar dates, and a new record in the bookings request table is created with the dates, the calculated total cost. So how much is it going to cost? The calculated total cost. The apartment. Sorry, here's a good one. A relationship with the apartment, with the selected apartment, as in the database, and a relationship with the apartment's host. So again, you could write more, you could write less, but let's talk about what this is getting us thinking about. So I talked a second ago about it, so you're now thinking, well, who needs to approve the booking, etc. But in terms of my database, well, I'm now thinking I need a bookings request table, or maybe I just need a bookings table, and maybe there's just a field in it that says approved, yes or no. You know, maybe you could simplify it that way. And then again, these are just the thoughts you're trying to create. Because I might edit that and I say, right, okay, a new record in the bookings request table is created. I'm just going to say, and the bookings table is created. I'm going to edit this with the dates, calculated cost, and I'm just going to say the approval is set to false and the host is notified of a new booking request. So I've got a few things here, right? I've got a workflow for creating, I've got a screen actually before that, I've got a screen for creating an apartment, selecting an apartment, picking the dates. I've now got a new workflow for taking that information, so what apartment, when did I want it, putting that into the database. I now know my bookings table. The fields I probably need in the bookings table are going to be things like who booked it, so a relationship with the tourist, you know, who owns the apartment, so a relationship with the host, what apartment does the booking pertain to, so a relationship with the apartment, how much is it going to cost, so probably a number field and also a currency field. Does it cost that in pound sterling, is it US dollars, you know, is it Canadian dollars, what is it? And then I'm also going to have a Boolean or a switch, yes, true, no, a true, false, yes, no field in there that says approved, yes or no. And then I also know that I need this other workflow, a workflow that says the host is now notified of a new booking request. And that starts to get me thinking. Again, if we think about how your app can expand out, that gets me thinking, well, do they get a mobile request? Do I text them? Is it a push notification? Are they then allowed to configure what notifications they want in profile? Now, thankfully, I'm not going to go into that level of detail because that is the kind of thing I can worry about after a launch or later on or after I get some customer feedback. But again, it just gives you an idea of where this can start to grow arms and legs, and also where you can control it, because you don't need to send a notification yet. I could just say approval set to false. So you've got various different ways of thinking about it. I can also do when a tourist wants to browse listings, they type into the search bar and use the available filters. I'm going to specify these. You don't need to. Again, you don't need to go into this detail, but I'm going to bedrooms, location. What else do you need? Bathrooms. Is that a good one? We'll go for it. So you get bedrooms, you get location, you get bathrooms. When a tourist wants to browse listings, they type into the search bar and use the available filters. And then we're going to have a workflow or something like that. So the actions, so we've got the who, we've got the outcome, so when you want to browse listings, and we've got the when to type into the search bar, and then we're starting to talk about the actions. They will see listings returned from the apartments table, showing. And now you could go into this detail, but what we're showing the stored in database, photos, description, rating. I've not talked about that yet. Rating and address. Rating, address, and nightly cost. So, and these other ones we've talked about specifically when to save data. That's really, really important. But equally, you can also talk about, just almost just showing data, just displaying data. That could be the action. Particularly if you're just reading data, if you're not taking any user input, that's when it's going to be useful. So, that's a few examples of how you would think about scenarios. Is it the exact, perfect way to do it? It's up to you. That's how I like to do it. I just like to, when I start creating an app, I just like to have a bit of a view that says, right, I know where I'm beginning, I know what I need to do first, I know I need the booking appointment functionality, which means I know I need this screen, that screen, and it's just a good way to find a starting point, to start thinking about the challenges around your app. And hopefully, at this stage you've been through the 4 pillars, hopefully you've played with a couple of no-code tools at this point and started to get a feel for how this all works. I'm sure you're still going to be daunted. I'm sure there's still going to be a lot of stuff you don't fully understand or that you won't be able to think out because you've just not had the experience to do it yet. And that's totally okay. Your canvas will probably be a lot smaller than mine, less content on it. And if it is, that's a good thing. Again, this is just really a way for you to get started. But at any time, if you're not sure if your canvas is kind of, if it's not helping you, if it's not kind of, getting you the results, reach out, give us a shout in the community, at office hours, whenever, and hopefully we will manage to kind of help you figure it out. But with that said, there is no exact way to fill this out, so don't worry too much about getting exact. Don't worry if your canvas looks right. The number one question you've got to ask, is this making building your app easier? If it's not, there might be something wrong. If it is, then no matter what it says, you're on the right track. Thanks very much, and I'll speak to you again soon.